Cove, where the Sydney Opera House stands, is Dubba Gully, where a brick hut was built for Bennelong by Governor Arthur Phillip in 1790. Bennelong was from the Wangal people and is regarded one of the most significant and notable Aboriginal people in the early history of Australia.
Today, Dubba Gully is known as Bennelong Point and is the home of the Sydney Opera House. A worldwide design competition was won by Danish architect Jorn Utzon in 1957, who presented a groundbreaking sketch of a building that looked like a regatta of massive yachts sweeping down the harbour. It was beautiful, striking and different.
And it was just about unbuildable. Wind tunnel tests showed that the envisioned building would not stand up. Utzon and his team of engineers worked tirelessly on the design, with construction finally starting in 1959. Over the next 7 years, pressure was piled upon the architect until Utzon resigned, flew out of Australia, and never returned to see the completed building. The Opera House eventually opened in 1973. We are now approaching Taronga Zoo. Officially opened in 1916 as a form of entertainment, the modern zoo has taken focus on conservation. It features some of Australia's most unusual animals, plus elephants, gorillas, tigers, lions, rhinos, seals, and much more. When you arrive by water, you can take the cable car up the hill and enjoy the zoo on a stroll back down.
When Europeans first heard reports of these weird Australian animals, scientists thought someone had made them up. I mean, look at the platypus. It looks like a beaver with a bill like a duck. It lays eggs, gives milk, and has a poison spur on its hind leg. Or think about the kangaroo, a 2-meter tall giant that can't run but only hops, keeps its baby in a pouch, and boxes like a prized fighter. How insane is that, even for Mother Nature's standards?
See that metallic structure at the edge of Bradley's Head? That's the original mast of the HMAS Sydney, a light cruiser that saw action in the First World War.
In November 1914, the weather station on Cocos Islands, situated northwest of Perth, Western Australia, radioed that it was under attack by a raiding party from a notorious German cruiser, SMS Emden. The cruiser had already sunk 23 merchant ships and 2 warships. The Sydney steamed straight for the Cocos and engaged in a furious exchange of fire with the German ship, which got the worst. The Australian cruiser left the disabled wreck of the Emden on the beach at Cocos and captured 110 prisoners. As for the HMAS Sydney, it remained in service until 1928. She was eventually scrapped, and its fighting top was placed here at Bradley's Head. It stands as a memorial to the 4 men who died in the heroic action of November 1914.
Bradley's Head, Burraguggy, is Aboriginal name, and where fresh estuarine waterfall flows that's full of eels, yabbies, before it meets the salt water in the south direction. These quiet waters have been fished for seals, turtles, the crustaceans, the seasonal shark, all hunted and collected along the shoreline and way up into the freshwater environments. Shellfish are more common and diverse in salty water compared to the fresh waters.
Base for canoes and a campsite base for the Gadigal people. The cove itself was protected and with clean water, and behind the beach lay a freshwater pond formed by a spring.
Camp Cove also had significance for the European settlers, even if it was not their first stop. After 24,000 kilometres and 242 days at sea, the very first place where the European settlers disembarked was Botany Bay, around 18 kilometres south of Sydney Harbour. After only 2 days at Botany Bay, Captain Phillip knew that Botany Bay was not a suitable place for his fleet of 11 ships to establish a colony.
When the first fleet realised that Botany Bay was an unsuitable site for settlement, they took 3 longboats and set off to explore Port Jackson, as Captain James Cook had named the harbour north of Botany Bay. They were looking for a good run of fresh water, safe anchorage, and richer soil for agriculture.
That's why, on the 21st of January, Captain Phillip, alongside a squad of men on 3 small boats, sailed north to explore other bays along the coast. After having travelled Sydney Harbour up, down and sideways, the sailors stopped for the night to this cove. They scrawled camp on the map they were hastily drawing, and the name stuck.
As As we're now crossing the heads, please remain seated for your safety.
Galigalang Baladu is the Aura and Goringai Dreamtime geometry, where salt water flows east-west between the north-south natural highland border points. This space is a direct connection to Dreamtime custodians of our rained cloud, Bayami Gurung, our moonrise, Yarnanda, our Southern Cross, Murlong Dinbury Emu Star Women, and Sunrise, Goringi, all activate this origin water flow ceremonies around Sydney Harbour. Unlike Uluru and Stonehenge on land, this space is an altar of water connecting Sky Clan ancestors and Aboriginality. Today we can access these high landform places with special approval for our modern ceremonial gatherings, where descendant family leaders continue with their respect of teaching and learning moral and ethical behaviours. We see the sky ancestors rise and set, which touch our spirit, belief and practice. And this is a behaviour showcasing our geometric yellow circle, a full moon and sunrise, which we have showcased on our Aboriginal flag today.
Behind us on this part of South Head overlooking the Pacific Ocean, you can spot a structure painted in distinctive red and white stripes. That is Hornby Lighthouse, which still marks the southern entrance to Sydney Harbour, more than 150 years after its construction. Prior, this part of Sydney's harbour was a real nightmare for ships and many lives were lost.
I'm sure if that lighthouse had been there when Lieutenant James Cook sailed past in 1770, he would have stopped for a while, you know? James Cook's first voyage took him 3 years from 1768 to 1771, but ended with him putting the east coast of Australia officially onto the world map.
Cook was one of the greatest seamen and navigators of his century, perhaps ever. He was not a soldier or conqueror, he was a discoverer. Cook's interest in scientific pursuits, especially astronomy, geography and accurate mapping, led to his continued fame. He was passionate for learning and inquiry, not acquisition and subjugation. This interest rubbed off on his men.
The headland we're passing now is called North Head. This area has an extensive history, from the traditional owners, the Gamaragal clan, to modern-day Australians.
Manly is Guy Murray families from the Gamaragal clan living around these quiet waters and foreshore areas, ensuring food gathering, farming, close by the Dreamtime high ground of North Head must always be respectful. Despite the abundance of resources of seasonal fish, shellfish, bird, animals, insects, reptiles, they're all evidenced in the art and the caves and midden sites that have been found over this coastal shoreline, and engraving sites when the whales, journeying north or south, beach themselves at Gulba, Manly today.
Some of the early interactions between First Nations people and the European colonists occurred in the North Head area. Notably, the First Fleet, led by Captain Arthur Phillip, made contact with the local Aboriginal people in 1788.
Circular Quay, Gardi Warrani is its Aboriginal name. It's the homeland of Dallawallada families. 15 to 20 people of all ages have lived amidst a forest of coastal heath, she oaks, linking south to the hanging swamp of Centennial Parks that feed our tank stream, still flowing from the sandy, rocky outcrops, where this place gets its modern name, the Rocks. It's an Aboriginal site because it's where the salt water meets the fresh waters today.
It's the same bay that was named Sydney Cove by the Europeans, after Lord Sydney, who was responsible for the expedition that saw the first fleet of settlers. This is the spot where Captain Arthur Phillip came ashore on January 26, 1788, and raised the British flag. The British transported 750 convicts to Australia from overcrowded British jails in order to build a new penal colony.
Today, it's a transport hub for Sydney with its elevated trains and one of the world's largest ferry systems. It's bounded by two of Sydney's most famous icons, the Sydney Opera House and the spectacular Harbour Bridge. Towards the Harbour Bridge, where you can see the old sandstone buildings, is the oldest European settlement in Sydney, called the Rocks.
If you are disembarking here, please remember to close this app to save your battery. The Sydney Harbour National Park. The area covers both natural and artificial attractions, ranging from beautiful cliff-top walks to pristine beaches, historical buildings, and even military fortifications.
Some of these defensive structures were part of the Sydney Harbour anti-submarine boom net. Installed during the Second World War, this 1.4 kilometres long infrastructure unintentionally came into the spotlight on the night of the 31st of May, 1942.
Yep, this event is known as the Attack on Sydney Harbour and involved the Imperial Japanese Navy, which was at war with Australia at that time. 3 midget submarines were able to penetrate the unfinished boom net, trying to sink Allies vessels moored in the harbour. 2 of the subs were intercepted before causing any damage, but one entered the port and destroyed the converted ferry HMAS Cuttable, killing 21 sailors. Parts of the 2 Japanese submarines were later recovered from the seabed and used to assemble a composite vessel. It's currently on display at the Australian War Memorial in Canberra. When it was decided that a bridge between the north and the south was needed in 1912, the design by architect Dr. John Bradfield was chosen. It was one of the largest steel arch bridges in the world, with 8 traffic lanes and 2 rail lanes spanning 508 metres. They built it starting from either side, and when the 2 ends touched in the centre, they were only about a centimetre off. Those massive stone towers are mostly decorative, as the whole weight of the bridge is carried by 2 steel pins located on each end. A museum dedicated to the history of the bridge is in the South Pylon, including a lookout.
Harbour Bridge. The water space here is Dallawardyung, and this space connects 2 rocky points, the North Gumaragles and the South Dallawarda. It's a short distance, but where families dispatch messengers with special invitations to smoking ceremonies, messenger sticks, or a simple swimmer undergoing an endurance test of strength against the strong currents, or a rower in a small Noe canoe. Which way do you think you could deliver the message?
As we head under the bridge into Circular Quay, on our right is Dawes Point, a favourite place for wedding photographers.
Yep, it was also the site of Sydney's first gun battery and first observatory. Some of the guns are still visible across the sea. Take some time to stroll through the district just to the right of here, which is considered the very heart of Old Sydney. The Rocks is where Sydney started. Here you could have found the first settlement, the first hospital, the first church, the first post office,
The first jail, the first hanging ground. Originally, the area also included cheap inns, grog shops, and what delicate people used to call houses of ill fame. In case you were wondering, the Rocks area takes its name from the original constructions made of local sandstone which populated the neighbourhood.
Now, the old buildings are filled with open-air markets, restaurants, little hotels, craft fashion stores, and small cafes. Here you can also enjoy live performances and admire the creations of the finest Australian contemporary artists.